Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 140 on June 26, 2019. I am co-host Jason Neiffer. I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the fabulous University of Montana campus. And joining me as always, good evening, Dr. Wes Fryer.
Good evening, Jason. I am glad to be joining from Oklahoma City on the final day that I can say I am the Director of Technology at the Cassidy School, because I am now pivoting to a new academic role. So looking forward to a couple days with our daughter, who is doing orientation for her new college, University of Central Oklahoma. They've got a nice program called Forge. They told us to leave our Oklahoma State and OU colors behind as we come. So I thought that was appropriate. We are Broncos now, except they spell it Bronchos. That's more information than you needed. But anyway, I am glad to be here, and I will actually be offline on assignment in a mysterious location off-grid for the next 2 weeks. But I hear rumor that you may keep the show going at least in 2 weeks, but probably not for the 4th of July holiday week.
Yes, in light of the birthday of America, which also happens to be my wife and I's 15-year anniversary next Thursday. We haven't got married on the 4th of July because both of our parents got married on the 4th of July, and so we couldn't ignore that coincidence and had to do it. So 15 years ago, next Thursday on a cold and rainy day up on a mountain in Clancy, Montana, my wife and I tied the knot, as it were. So we will be taking next week off in celebration of America, and more importantly, 15 years of wedded bliss. So, but that's the future. I want to talk about today, and this is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a weekly podcast that goes through the tech headlines and tries to put a little educational spin on there. Wes and I are kind of nerds from probably similar points of view pedagogically, maybe slightly different points of view technologically, and we want to kind of go through the week's headlines and see what is up. So, Wes, I want to kind of pick up on something that we discussed briefly in last week's episode, but you and I we've been given our notice that our virtual broadcast room is going away. And my understanding is that you have some alternatives, but I would like to point out an article from 9 to 5 Google that talks about the technology that Wes and I use to record our podcast every week, which is referred to as Hangouts on Air, is officially going away. And we received our notice last week pre-broadcast, and we're pretty disappointed to hear that otherwise rock-stable technology will no longer be with us. And YouTube and Google have not really pointed towards an alternative for our use case. Apparently, they have been telling people you can go to youtube.com/webcam, which is actually something that I know works because I've played with it before, but you can go there and kind of do what we're doing now. If you've ever seen the video of the podcast, but in essence, you can just broadcast from a single webcam. But of course, with Wes being in the Midwest and me in the Rocky Mountain West, that is not going to work out so hot for us. So, Wes, you did mention that there were some alternatives, perhaps, that you found that might able to do something similar to this in the future.
I have done just a little bit of research, and I will start by just saying I'd love to know if anybody's seen an article or has a theory about why this is happening. Like, I don't know, if other than, I guess, maybe Google's not making money on this, and so just like they do with other products, they ditch them and, make the users, really bummed out when the product is gone. I don't know. I don't know the reason for this. But as is the case with, one door closes, another opens. I'm sure we will be learning more about live streaming options. I will say it's just been remarkably wonderful. If you harken back to the mid 2000s and late 2000s with EdTech Talk and the webheads and ways in which they had to literally have a class that people would go through to run these different programs, Soundflower and all these things to route your audio streams. It's been a dream to have something so drop dead easy that has been very reliable. But a couple of weeks ago, when we were having difficulty, we did jump into a Zoom conference, and unfortunately that wasn't live broadcast. there's not that many people that are actually tuning in live, but it's still cool to do that. And we do encourage you, if you're watching live, to join our chat room on YouTube, and we will try and monitor that to give you voice. But there's an option for Zoom. However, it requires basically a $55 a month investment, because you have to pay for a pro account, which is $15 a month. And then you also have to pay a $40 a month add-on for webinar, which, gives you like 100 people or something. And anyway, I don't think we're going to pursue that option. Like, Jason and I are kind of cheap, and I just don't think that's probably our path. However, there are some free options. And if we want to stick with YouTube, we could do this too. There's some software called Open Broadcaster software. And that software acts as an encoder. Now, we can go buy something too, like Wirecast, which is for the Mac, but it's about $250. And what you end up doing is configuring advanced features inside the Hangout. Well, actually, I guess the Hangout's going away. So let me scratch that. We would not be able to continue using Google Hangouts at all. So this would be, I guess, a Facebook Live streaming option. And I think there's, it'd be a different audience that could potentially join us on Facebook. And I think I will look into that. I mean, hopefully they're going to give us a date when this thing is actually going to go away, because it just said later this year. But I would hypothesize that, later in the summer, early in the fall, this would be a good thing to experiment with. So I'll do some more research about that. And if anybody listening has any experience with that, it appears to me that Open Broadcaster software is something like Wirecast, but it's free, and your computer acts as an encoder and then sends that video stream out to, in this case, Facebook, for Facebook Live. So that, I think, would allow us to host a multi-person call, but I'm not completely sure of that. And I also don't know what Jason, one of us would need who is not hosting the call in order to be sending our stream. I'm going to guess that we would need to both be running Open Broadcaster. Somebody's the host, and then somebody else is sending the stream, and then the host takes both of those, sends them to Facebook. So if anyone has experience with said advanced features of live webcasting from your kitchen, basement, dining room, whatever the case may be, let us know. And we will be learning more as we seek to continue not only producing the show, but providing a live connection option for it.
And the other thing I would note is that I think other EdTech broadcasts or EdTech podcasts also use the same technology when they're located in different locations. And there's lots of fancy things you can do to record a podcast. The 5x5 network has a lot of good tutorials on recording podcasts. And what they do is they do it over Skype, but they also record locally, and then they splice together the high quality local recording together to create as high of a possible quality recording. But that, of course, takes a lot more post-processing. And one thing that I've been very lucky to be able to boast is that my very awesome co-host does all of our post editing and posting the podcast, and that takes an amount of time, even with our fairly elegant workflow, to do that. And it's just sad that I think this may not be a technology that is used by even a small minority of users. It's probably a minute minority of users. It's valuable, and there's just nothing else in the marketplace anyway like this.
Something I just realized, and I'll reach out to him. So shout out to Paul Allison and the Teachers Teaching Teachers group, and then also EdTech Talk. I mean, I mentioned EdTech Talk. They've been around, I would say, forever. No, it's like this all started in the mid-2000s, edtechtalk.com. But they are also, by the looks of it, using Google Hangouts regularly for their broadcasting. And this was a group connected to the Webheads and Cheryl Oakes and Alice Barr and other very innovative people who, were doing this live before I had tried. I did, lots of offline podcasting prior to it. So it'll be good to reach out to them, see what their plan is, and find out, because, it's certainly possible. We've talked about, joining a network. We've talked about, how we might try and monetize or something like that. Maybe we'll explore that, but we're definitely going to have to explore an alternative to the Google Hangout. So it will be good, as always, to reach out to our digital network, our PLN, and find out what other people are planning to do. And hopefully Google, I mean, it seems so crazy for Google to take away this kind of power, right? I mean, this is an incredible power to be able, and I mean, I guess it has something to do with the virality of their platform and unwanted content, but this is the first time actually I think I've seen Google do something that is really reducing our ability to publish and share. And I think I mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, it is so challenging when we look at the issues surrounding offensive content, inappropriate content, weaponized, disinformation. There's all kinds of terms for these things, but basically that, there is a line out there. I think everyone who's rational can agree it is not great for a terrorist, to be live streaming their shooting or they're blowing up bombs or whatever. I mean, wherever you are on the political spectrum, hopefully we can agree that, there are some things that are beyond the pale. And so we could debate where that line is and how that line gets decided. But it is just so challenging today because of the way that, platforms, especially the big ones like YouTube, like Facebook, have this potential for virality. And that potential was not there in the mid-2000s when, as we called it, the Web 2.0 interactive web, really took off and we started writing on our blogs and we started podcasting, et cetera. That is a different environment. So, Jason, how do you view the tech correction today? What is your, crystal ball and how optimistic or pessimistic are you given, what has happened or not happened surrounding regulation and responses to a lot that's been happening with our big platforms?
I think the 2020 presidential election is going to be absolutely critical in two ways. The first one is that if we can manage to get through that election and not experience similar things to 2016, and I want to be super clear that I do think that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. I think the evidence is overwhelmingly clear. I don't know if it swayed the election, right? I think that's something that, even though I, may have not liked the outcome in 2016. The super bottom line is that I think there were a lot of factors beyond Facebook that impacted that particular election. But I would like to get through 2016 and not experience similar doom and gloom that we experienced during the last cycle around. So 2020 is critical. I also think that it is a referendum on technology from the standpoint of regulation. And the first of the Democratic debates, or first two big Democratic debates, are happening. My puppy is literally trying to chew up this roll of whiteboard tape or sticky whiteboard stuff. Like, he just had this in his mouth. By the way, I have a new puppy. His name is Louie, and he is delightful. But man, does that dog chew! And now he's chewing up a map of Montana. So it's
it sounds really like we need a few bones and a few other legitimate, more legitimate options in the house.
He actually ate a Kong yesterday. For dog owners, that's something impressive to actually chew through a Kong. So he's actually good. Eat the map. It's good distraction for him. So the first Democratic debates are happening this week, and there are candidates that are much more aggressive about not just regulating technology. I think every Democratic presidential candidate has a view on the government should take more action on regulating technology. Elizabeth Warren wants to break up big tech using antitrust law, and she's got some supporters in that wing, and there's another wing that's a little closer to Silicon Valley that doesn't believe in that. But I think the tech correction, which is going to happen and is happening, we're in the midst of the tech correction. The end game there will matter a lot on who's elected to Congress in 2020 and who ends up in the White House. And it could end up that, I don't know how you do this, but we could break up the big ones. We could break up Google. We could break up Facebook. We could break up Apple. We could break up Netflix or one of the media companies. That's all, I think, in the realm of possibility. But it's something we have to keep an eye on. And also, please become an informed voter on this. Like, not everyone shares. I think everyone's got a view on this, but the end game realities may or may not be something that you're ultimately interested in. And so you should absolutely take the responsibility of knowing what the candidates want, and you do a good job of vetting them to make sure they are doing what you perceive to be the right course of action here. So absolutely, I think that's all very much a pretty huge factor here. So,
well, I went ahead and copied an article I don't think we talked about, but I had in the show notes a couple weeks ago, and I just put it in below our Geeks of the Week because we don't really have a tech correction topic today. But this was a Politico article from June 10th, 2019. It was titled "Newspapers Embarrassing Lobbying Campaign." And I actually heard about this on my Google Home, I think listening to Reuters News, or maybe it was NPR. But goodness gracious, given the opportunity to basically whine and argue for regulation, the newspaper industry sees the opportunity to beg for an antitrust exemption it thinks it needs in its fight with Google and Facebook for advertising dollars, and basically to try and use regulation to take money away from Google and Facebook and try and save the journalism industry. And I do think that journalism is hugely important. I do think that we need to be making a greater public investment in journalism. I think the UK via the BBC, continues to produce phenomenal content. And I think that there is a sizable government investment that they have in that. Of course, we have public television, and there is some public funding in terms of governmental funding for that. But I think a lot of that, comes from individual donors and things like that. That article says that currently Google and Facebook collect 73% of all digital advertising, and so that is a real stark number. But I definitely it's sad. It's just sad to hear this kind of let's use regulation to try and just. I don't know. We do need journalism to survive, and we need high quality journalism, and we need local journalism, and the dynamics that are happening right now with respect to just, hey, let's let anybody who wants to buy anyone do that, get as big as they want, and then fire as many people as they want, and just those patterns are not wonderful. So I do think that there's a place for regulation, but boy, it is super challenging to see how that needs to play out. So, and I don't know, where do we have discussions like that in our society to discuss and debate the proper role of regulation? It seems like in the mainstream media, people are too busy screaming at each other and then having just crazy things. You're like, really, this is a headline? Really, we're saying this? I don't know. It just doesn't seem like we're having that opportunity for reasoned discussion and debate. So
right. Well, and you look at the hearings that are going on, it's not much better. I mean, the part of the problem I think that I have with allowing Congress to decide this without experts in the room is that it's clear that the men and women of Congress generally don't understand how the internet works, and they're not able, or they just don't get that advertising does run the free and open internet right now. That's a reality that we're in, and I'm not saying that reality is a good thing. It's just the situation that has developed in the past 20 years. And that actually inspires. There was a really fascinating article from Recode and Vox on June 24th. It reports that the cost of an ad-free internet for the typical user would be $35 a month. And so if we wanted to find a scheme to have you pay a single amount every month and have that information, or have that. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at my silly puppy. Have that money then go to people that are indeed keeping track of content for you, so that you can don't chew on my chair. It would cost users typically about $35 a month, because that's what's being generated off of the typical user's data across the free internet sphere. And that's not a lot of money. In fact, it would be less than what most people pay for internet access every month, or cell phone service, or all the ways they maybe get on the internet. So it's not that wholly unreasonable of a concept. But I would say, though, how do we set up that scheme so it's fair? Obviously, the majority of that data trade right now is from the big companies. I'm speaking of Google and Facebook, and I don't think all of us would be okay with, $22 of our 35 going to Google, for example. So that's all something we have to work out in the wash. But our data is worth X amount, and that amount is creating a massive economy that is thriving. And we may not like the result of that, but make no mistake that that's absolutely a factor that's making this a complicated discussion.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things that we need to figure out, because not only can we not today see our data that has been collected in this opaque cloud that is over all of us, in terms of corporate collection of data, the ways that we go to CVS or Walgreens and put in our phone number or email as far as frequent customer and anyway, all of our purchasing data, all that stuff gets collected. We can't see it in the same way that we can see a credit report. We need to be able to see that data, to access that data, but we need to address this idea that data, is worth a lot of money. I'm going to do a shout out to an article that is actually a couple years old. This is from June of 2016, but it links to this idea of voters and elections, and then who is deciding. Jason's point that it's pretty clear that many members of Congress don't really understand how the internet works. Richard Dawkins has an article, or had an article, in Prospect Magazine, which is a UK publication, and it was titled, "Richard Dawkins, Ignoramuses Should Have No Say on Our EU Membership, and That Includes Me." And if you're not familiar with him, Dawkins is a real outspoken advocate for evolution. But what he's saying in this context, and he's a Brit, is that he didn't know and doesn't know enough about politics and economics to make a really good decision on whether or not Britain should stay in the EU or to leave. And so putting these kinds of things up for a vote is really ridiculous. And I have not read, I'm like less than 50 pages into this book by Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari, and it's called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And it's pretty interesting. He's really a materialist and really thinks that we are all just our biology and chemistry. But there is undoubtedly, I would say today, a greater ability for marketers and those willing to pay to hack our brains and be able to get us certainly to be upset and angry at each other, but also to potentially, sway our vote when it comes to an election. So to Jason's point that the 2020 presidential elections in the United States are going to be really pivotal, my segue or connection to what Dawkins said there is, I really think that we need to take a look at our representative democracy, right? We have a model that says we know every citizen can't understand and study every single issue. So what we do is we elect people whose job it is to study the issues and understand, the different complexities, and then make these decisions on our behalf and to vote. And so the whole idea of putting things to a plebiscite, basically, where, hey, let's all vote. I mean, we've had that happen in Oklahoma with different things. And now, we're not a recreational marijuana state, but we are whatever is just below that with CBD. And I have friends of family members who, have seizures. Well, actually, a friend here too who has a child, an older child now, who, those are miracle drugs that do great things. But it's crazy that we've had these kinds of legal changes, and it's basically a situation here in Oklahoma, I think, where if somebody spends enough money on enough billboards and enough clever advertising, then people go for it, and it's just really not great governance. So I think we need to find ways, as I said, for us to be having debates and discussions on these kinds of issues. I think technology can and should play an important role in that, but I don't think we're there. And I think that, we've got a lot of work to do, let's just say, in the realm of citizenship, democracy, and, how we're going to make our system and hopefully, have even better outcomes. when we're living in this hyper-connected world with a 24/7 media cycle and the potential for viral content and everything else. So my wife and I watched we didn't finish it, but one of the Star Trek movies the other night, and just like, how are we going to get there, right, into this what appears to be relatively I don't even have to know the right word, but like a good government that is, providing and, not just ripped apart by extreme voices and all that. Obviously that's science fiction, but you hope that we're going to be able to somehow make our way to a better political environment than we are today.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's a lot of politics for today. Do you want to talk some more Chrome news? I saw you have a lot of Chrome OS articles tonight.
Sure. There's a lot of interesting things going on in Chrome world, and I want to start off with what I think is a real game changer for the Chrome OS. And I had read about this a couple of months ago, and I didn't really understand what it was. And as it turns out, Chrome OS version 75 dropped this week, and it appeared across my Chromebook architecture because I have multiple Chromebooks in my life. And now that I understand it, it is unbelievably cool. So About Chromebooks on June 22nd reports this. And the idea here is that you have always been able, for the last, 2-3 years, to mount other cloud-based file systems. So obviously Google Drive works amazingly with Chrome OS, right? But if you have OneDrive, if you're on a Microsoft campus and you have OneDrive, or you use Box.net, or you use one of the hundreds of other cloud providers, you have to go through a web interface to access that. And one of the elegances of Chrome OS is the fact that you can easily navigate through your Google Drive like you would on a Windows machine with a file system. And it's great to be able to do that, but it's hard to access other systems. And there was a wonky way you could download software. They opened this up a couple years ago, but the plugins were not super great. They crashed a lot, and they came from third-party providers. And so I remember the OneDrive one I finally got to work. I do a lot of OneDrive work with the Northwest Council for Computer Education, and it would just crash randomly. Oh, and it was from Japan. So the instructions weren't in English, and while I trust generally the Japanese, I don't trust developers, and I always thought I was putting my data at risk by doing that. Well, here's how it works now. So if you get into your Chrome OS account and download the Android app, let's say for OneDrive, and sign into the app, it will now mount the OneDrive file system like Google Drive in the Files app in Chrome OS. So today, as an example, I did that. I got onto my personal OneDrive account and was able to stream music from my Chromebook from OneDrive. It works with Box.net, which is a property of the University of Montana. They big Box.net users, and so I can mount that. The only major one it doesn't work with right now is Dropbox, which is sad. I also have a Dropbox account. I keep it mostly because all my old teaching files are in there, and it allows unlimited going back into history. So I've actually a couple of times dug around files I thought I had, and ended up they were deleted and held in kind of a purgatory that exists on Dropbox. But my guess is they'll head there too. But if you are a Chromebook user and you're like on a college campus that's super into Office 365, you can now mount Office 365 by simply downloading the Android app, signing in, and then it automatically mounts into the file piece. There's a flag you have to turn on to do it right now if it's not automatically happening, but it is super cool, and I was able to get it set up in about 4 minutes today.
And shout out to Kevin C. Toffel, who is the author of the website that hosts that article, and he is the one that wrote that. It's about Chromebooks.com. And he said in the article that when the Chrome OS 75 version hits the stable channel, that's just going to be there for everybody. You're not going to have to do any flags or anything. So cloud storage is hugely important. I was helping one of our former employees who came back to school for some assistance with, some of these issues and talking about whether it's Dropbox or it's Google Drive. I am pleased to report that more of our faculty and staff than ever are saving all of their stuff all the time into the cloud. And so the days of, oh man, I didn't back that up, or oh shoot, my system, either whether you're doing a sneakernet kind of USB thumb drive, or people can be set up for automated kinds of things like that. But yeah, when you save in the cloud and it's there, I mean, if anybody's had that experience of losing data, that can just, can be very catastrophic. So I think it is a good thing that these integrations are coming. And how long, Jason, have you been Chromebook only? Have you been keeping track?
I would say I was moving in that direction probably 12 months ago is when I brought my Pixel book. And then at work, it's been the last 6 months. And now, I mean, I do remote into a Windows box occasionally, mostly to do FTP work, to pull down backups from our LMS server. But other than that, it's been pretty much 100% of the time. I'm on a Chromebook right now, broadcasting tonight, today. Very busy week at the Digital Academy, weirdly busy week at the Digital Academy for a summer week, and I was in several conference calls today. I had several productive meetings. I had a couple of parent phone calls I needed to deal with, and was Chrome OS the whole time. And I just love the elegant simplicity of it. And I have to admit, I don't really use Android apps that often. I have one Android app that I have on my work profile that allows me to stream music from OneDrive. It's called Cloud Player, and so I have all of my old MP3 collection and playlists on OneDrive, and so I can stream my own music at work. But otherwise, I don't really use Android apps. I'm using straight up Chrome OS, and it's amazing. I've just been really, 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 really super happy with it, and hope that continues into the future.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to also talk about a Google article, but this one is related to media literacy. So this was from TechCrunch on June 24th, 2019, and the title is Google's new media literacy program teaches kids how to spot disinformation and fake news. So among my new roles for this next year, pardon me, I will be teaching all of our 5th and 6th graders their semester course, which they take on computers. And that will basically be not only including keyboarding, but digital literacy, media literacy, and digital citizenship. And so this program that Google has launched is basically, it adds on to what they've already had, which is their Be Internet Awesome program. But they have a section now that has these 6 new media literacy activities. And so their acronym there for keeping safe is to smart, alert, strong, kind, and brave. That's what being Internet Awesome is. Sharing with care is Internet Smart. Don't falling for fake. And this is the new part, is Internet Alert. Internet Strong is securing your interests. Being Internet Kind means it's cool to be kind. And then Internet Brave means when in doubt, talk it out. I think this is just a fantastic curriculum. And so I'm going to definitely be using some of this. Their second lesson, Don't Fall for Fake, has these 6 activities subtitled, Don't Bite That Phishing Hook. Who are you really about these bots? Is that really true? Spotting disinformation online. And then they have this, I guess it's a game simulation called Interland. And this one's called Reality River. So there's activities for Interland on each one of these. But great curriculum, great resources. And by the way, we need to have some agile curriculum when it comes to technology in our schools. I remember just a few years ago, it wasn't that long, maybe it was 5 years ago, working with a local group that wanted to really get WordPress and content management systems into schools, and, faced a lot of difficulty because Dreamweaver and, HTML and just the ways that things have been done in the past, it was hard to make a shift. And I don't really actually even know where that is today. In Oklahoma, our vocational education, career tech is what we call it, is definitely, I think, our best funded K-12 educational institutions. And so there's a lot of innovation that is happening there. But anyway, in our schools, no matter what size or shape or flavor, it's important for us to maintain agility and flexibility with respect to our curriculum that involves technology. So kudos to Google for coming out with this. And I will also mention that I will be headed the 3rd week of July to the wonderful state of Rhode Island for the Media Literacy Institute that is hosted by Renee Hobbs and the Media Education Lab. And I have been following her work for years and years, and just really, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, but I'm considering the possibilities of what it would look like if I publish some articles about media literacy in addition to some books in the next year or so, and basically try to set myself up maybe for an academic position at a university that involved media literacy. I don't know. I might end up continuing to work in the independent school world, which has been a great place to be for 4 years, but we shall see. Check it out, Google's media literacy program.
And then a couple other quick hits from our friends at the Google this week. Google Drive offline access. So for some time now, you've been able to set up offline access for Google Docs. And so we download the most recent docs to your local Chromebook or your browser for that matter. You could do this on a PC or a Mac. And as it turns out, they're going to expand that to other types of files. So we'll download PDFs or, more importantly, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint documents, which can be natively modified now by Google Drive. So that's an interesting piece.
And what I'd add to that, because our librarian talked to me about this week, be aware of file extensions. Without a file extension, many programs and many computers can be clueless as to how to handle their files. For I don't know how long, Microsoft Windows by default has hidden the file extensions, and you had to, go in and explicitly say, I want to see those extensions. And Mac kind of has done the same thing. You can still change them, but this is something that's really important. If you're using Google Drive specifically, make sure that you preserve file extensions, because if you don't, when you rename files, then you're going to have a confused computer when it tries to download that file and it's like, what the heck is this? I have no clue, how to handle it. So that's a good little tip for everyone.
And then a couple other quick hits. Google has announced that they are abandoning their tablet projects, which, to be frank, is pretty sad to me. That doesn't mean that other Chrome OS tablets won't appear in the marketplace, but they won't be Google designed and Google sponsored. I've always thought that I've not bought one yet, and all but one of the reasons why that's the case is because I felt like they were too expensive for what they were, but I assumed that over time they would go down in price. But I love the notion of the 10 and 11-inch Chrome OS tablet model, because it gave you the full web browser experience in addition to Android apps. And I think that the new iPad OS that's coming out to add to already pretty solid pieces of hardware, I think Apple's going to eat Google's lunch on this and continue to dominate in that market where I think Google could have been headed in an interesting direction there.
Man, this is huge news, right? We pivoted on our Chromebooks at school a couple years ago from Dell Mini 11, which is just a standard. Or they were, they were just standard laptop, no yoga, flip over, and touchscreen or anything like that. To the Lenovo 300E, which is a touchscreen, and you can use a regular number 2 pencil as your stylus. I did not play with that much at all in the last year, but the promise of that, with a stylus and being able to use that natural input, that just seems so important. And so for Google to dump this is huge, and I really am going to be interested to continue to follow this, because in terms of the future of computing, we're probably going, I would guess, and I'm not speaking for our school, and this is just Wes Fryer's opinion as, a guy who happens to work at this school. I think that we're going to be looking real seriously at one-to-one for our middle school, at least next year. And we've got a lot of Chromebook carts, currently, as well as, a smattering of iPads. I want, as a teacher, and I want as a learner, the opportunity to, not only consume and obviously get content, but create and make content, not only with my fingers on a keyboard, but also with my voice using speech-to-text technologies, which I use all the time. Even like writing Facebook posts now on my iPad, and I use that all the time. But being able to draw and write, I've had a chance, in the last couple months, with a couple new teachers this week, introducing them to the iPad and an Apple Pencil. 2 of our upper division math teachers, actually, we had a little session in May, and one of them got pretty excited and got approval. it's phenomenal, right? Like the tool set of being able to create on an iPad with an Apple Pencil, either generation 1 or 2, being able to do stuff live, being able to record things, being able to readily take what we just did, send it as a PDF to you in Google Classroom, etc. It's just phenomenal. So I think this is a rather shocking article. And, do you think this is over, Jason? Is Google, not only abandoning their own hardware dreams for tablets, but is this the end of Google OS as a tablet OS?
I hope not. I will say that I've never really been that impressed with, and I don't really understand why. Like they've never really supported tablets that well on Android. There is that new effort called Fuchsia OS, which everyone thinks is going to replace both Android and Chrome OS with a single operating system that is touch focused but still has good desktop cred to it. Apparently, the Pixelbook allows you to install Fuchsia, a very early alpha version of Fuchsia on it. I just think that if they had spent a little more time developing, they could have been a very attractive alternative to the iPad, because you still had the desktop style browser. And I can't stress enough that to me, at least, I mean, that's something that could live well. I mean, I live already with a Chromebook, right? Like Chromebook is my daily carry. And if you added to that a good tablet form factor, maybe something that was close to like the Microsoft Surface, a 12-inch tablet with a good enough keyboard that's in that kind of keyboard cover mode, I think that could be an enormously interesting prospect. But the fact that they're, going in another direction, that's sad. That said, I mean, one of the things that's been really unfortunate about Android tablets is that their gross reputation has meant that the innovation that is happening is almost ignored. Samsung recently released a 12-inch a 4x3 tablet that runs Android, that is a beautiful high-definition screen. It is super thin. I played with one at Costco a couple weeks ago. It's an $900 tablet, but it's utterly beautiful. It's bright screen. You can get a keyboard cover for it that's pretty solid, but it's kind of in the who cares, right? Like I know. In fact, most of the Google OS people Chrome OS people I know, they're super in the Google system. If they want a tablet, most don't, but if they want a tablet, they're carrying around iPads with them because the battery life, because of the stability of the operating system. And I know Google just can't seem to get its act together in that particular space.
Something that Kevin Toffel, also the author of this article, mentions is that he's still seeing references to Flapjack devices, and Flapjack is evidently a follow-on OS tablet that is expected to be in an 8 or 10.1 inch size, he says. And so, if that's not going to be from Google, then maybe that's going to be from a partner. So, I think the dream of one device to rule them all I think it's a what am I trying to say? When it's a false path or something like that. Like that's not. I don't think that any of us would be happy with that at this point. I mean, I'm using my iPad right here as well as my laptop, and you're not going to take my phone away from me, right? So, like it or not, we are in this multi-device world, and I think we're going to continue to be in the multi-device world. You're in the digital watch, world as well. So, add a fourth platform, the fourth screen.
Right. Well, I go back to, I remember this when the EEE PCs were released. The first, what were those things called?
Little PCs.
Yes.
One laptop per child.
The first of those, the tiny PC movement. I mean, the only people that I ever saw carrying those were nerds, like Wes and Jason variety nerds that had that at the side of their laptop, right? Like it was like a second laptop they were using. In fact, I remember it was either NCC or was ISTE. I can't remember. This was 2009-ish when the EEE PCs were super popular and were starting to become the 7-inch variety was the early popular one because it was so cheap. Couldn't really type on it. The screen was a horrible resolution. It ran a version of Linux that was basically unfunctional. But here was 30 35 of them in the crowd, but no one was using it as like, no one had it out by itself. They had it in addition to their laptop. And I still think we're going to fight form factors here. And remember, phones are getting bigger every year, right? That's part of the reason why tablets have not really taken off like one might assume, is because, you know, the newest phones are 6.2 inches. Remember, the tablet form factor that first caught on was a 7-inch tablet. So we're not that far away from having phones be big enough they could sub in for a laptop easily in a pinch.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens with Safari being fully functional as a desktop version on iPad OS, and to see that. I want to hear you talk, if you don't mind, in a minute here about the Apple Watch article, but I'm going to throw one in real quick on privacy. So I think this one was one we didn't get to last week. This is Wired on June 16th. It's time to switch to a privacy browser. Now, I'm going to start off by saying it is so hard to change behavior. I wrote a blog post this last week about how important it is not to let your credit card out of your sight when you're at a restaurant. And tonight, my wife and I kind of went out and celebrated the last tech director night or day or whatever. And I actually asked our server, well, can I go with you as you run this card? It felt awkward. It was weird. We get into our ruts and we don't want to change. And so to segue to this article about a privacy browser, I really don't want to change my browser preferences, right? I love Chrome. I still have Firefox and Safari every once in a while, and it's really been a security thing lately, like with our phones and stuff. There'll be certain links and that I just can't open on Chrome, and then on Firefox I can add an exception and be able to get to that. It's usually like an HTTPS connection, and it just thinks it's suspicious. But this is a really good article from Wired, from Casey Chin, and talking about privacy protection and the way that, there's been some discussion about what's going to happen with Chrome. I think you said last week they've backed off, and maybe they're going to still allow uBlock Origin and some of these other ad blockers to function on consumer browsers. But Apple has really been pushing privacy across its devices, not just on one device, but Safari is really fast. Talk to Ben Wilkoff. He says that is the browser to be using. Chrome looks like bloatware compared to it. Firefox is super, super fast now and has enhanced tracking protection in there. So this is saying that we should consider using a privacy browser, using something like DuckDuckGo, using Ghostery, which is a browser extension available for Android or iOS, or using something like Tor. If we want to talk about geeks and a small number of folks, not that many people are running Tor as their daily driver browser. Brave is another project, which is interesting. I haven't actually run this one, but a former Firefox developer with Mozilla, Brendan Eich, E-I-C-H, created it, and its mission is to keep you from being tracked on the web, but also find a better way to serve you ads. So they're trying to work that out. But I think this is important. It's certainly vital from a teaching standpoint for us to try and prevent the intrusion of advertisements into the classroom by running some kind of ad blocker. And, I just cringe when we have meetings, and this doesn't happen that often, but it has happened before, where somebody's showing a YouTube video and then here comes the pre-roll ad. And then I was like, no, they didn't, they don't have uBlock Origin put on their browser. So where are you today, Jason, with privacy browsers and or privacy extensions? And what would you say your exhortation is to the thousands of technology leaders breathlessly waiting to hear your next statement? Where do you think schools and tech leaders should be with respect to all this now?
I think the problem is that we have to find a way to deal with the tracking and the advertising and the cookies, and not break the functionality that is also relying on the same technologies. And as an example of this, the article we mentioned earlier about $35 being the approximate amount of money per month that's raised on your data, one of the things that article points out is that, we could have our phones stop tracking our location, but you know what? Apple Maps and Google Maps will both become dramatically less functional because of that, right? Like, the bottom line is that those technologies also provide benefit for us. And so I did figure out, I think I had mentioned this a couple of episodes ago, I did figure out how to install Firefox on Chrome OS. There's a Linux version of Firefox, and you can turn on Linux installations on your computer or your Chrome OS device. And so I've got Firefox at work. I use it for the same way you do, Wes, that I'm on one browser, it's not working the way it should. I want to test it in Firefox. So I do that, and I'm able to figure those pieces out. But it's not that I trust Google, although I do. I mean, that's part of the implicit bargain here. And I think I mentioned this a lot in other contexts, especially when I'm giving presentations, is that, you know, if Google gives you privacy controls like basically no other service does, right? Like every service is tracking you in some way, shape, or form. Google gives me an option to go in and take a look at that data and turn in certain pieces of tracking off, or even disable the functionality completely, whereas other tools do not. And the bottom line is that that's a trust relationship with me, right? So, I mean, I have 2 or 3 browsers on my phone. I always open up incognito or private windows in a browser when I'm searching for something that I don't want to follow me forever. I'm looking for a campground address and type in, you know, campground address into Google. I don't want to be served up tent ads for, you know, the next 6 months, and so I try to do those in incognito windows, but I've not really changed my habit there yet. And I know I was going to dig up this article, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal ran a pretty controversial article over the weekend calling the Chrome browser basically spyware, right? And there's been a lot of hubbub about that around the internet, that some people see the Chrome browser as straight up spyware now. But remember, ad networks are following you around anyways, right? Like, if it's not Google's ad network, it's one of the 25 other ad networks, including Facebook, I might add, that's doing that. So I am cautiously optimistic that the tech correction will bring regulation that figures out at least a careful or maybe even a fumble balance with that, and then it's going to be better. And that maybe is the closet optimist in me that says that at some point we got to work this out. But it seems like too much is at risk if we just start tearing these pieces apart without any meaningful thought of what we do next.
I will say, I think we need some privacy protection that's written into law. I think California has the most progressive laws right now in terms of privacy, and Europe has led the way with that. Of course, that's debatable, whether or not, you know, the right to be forgotten and these different, you know, laws are necessarily wonderful and great. But I'm interested and continue to be from a digital citizenship and advocacy standpoint and student voice standpoint. I do think that our students, just like citizens of all ages, need to care about privacy and understand its importance. We need to act to protect it. And I think we also need to understand these dynamics where basically the evolution of technologies has become a wonderful thing for authoritarian leaders who want to really restrict and keep, you know, close tabs on their population. Think about the social rating system now that's in place in certainly the Western provinces of China, if not the entire country, and also for corporate marketers that always want to know more information about folks so that they can market better into the mass of humanity out there and increase their profit. And so where the line needs to be drawn in terms of both of those groups, and I think also how we as a liberal democracy here in the United States should look different than, let's say, I would say communist China, but just like China is just a different animal than the communism any of us studied in school. So whatever that is, you know, we with the values that we purport to have, we should be advocating for some different policies, both at a governmental level and then at an individual level. So I think those are very important and relevant topics for us to grapple with, not just as citizens on our own, but also thinking about, you know, students in school and becoming aware of these issues and trying to hopefully educate student leaders who are going to move into society and positions of leadership and be able to have intelligent conversations and debates about these topics so that they can understand what it is they're contemplating, you know, regulating or shutting down or changing.
Absolutely so.
Any last articles you want to get before Geeks of the Week?
I want to point out one that's probably not worth a longer discussion, but there a lot of media reported this. But 9 to 5 Google mentions that in a recent interview, Bill Gates said that his biggest mistake in his time at Microsoft was allowing a mobile operating system, or the mobile operating system to float away from Microsoft. The fact that they started late to the transition to smartphone operating systems, and once they got there, they couldn't get it figured out, and essentially just allowed Android to come in and suck up the oxygen that was left after Microsoft died out of that, cost the corporation $400 billion. And I don't doubt that. I was closely following that the entire time just because it was such an interesting story. But the bottom line was that there was Apple, and they figured some stuff out, and Android, somewhat copying Apple, figured out a second place in the market that eventually became the dominant market leader. And Microsoft was late to the party, and because of that, could never get off the ground from a market standpoint. So very interesting discussion with Bill Gates about the loss of the mobile race to Apple and Google.
And that whole video is available on that article if anybody would like to check that out. That looks like a great one to watch. So, all right, Geeks of the Week. I'll go first. Mine's quick. I had a teacher yesterday that I visited with show me on her phone. Her son is at camp, and this app used facial recognition to find her son in every photograph that had been taken by camp staff anywhere, even photographs that had like 50 people in them. Hey, there he is. And so that was both cool and creepy at the same time. So the app is called Bunk One, and their Twitter is Bunk One Camps. And I think that's a bit of a sign of the times that we're seeing that kind of surveillance technology being used apparently to please parents who want to see what their kids are doing. But it also just kind of shows where especially cloud-based storage and analysis of photographs and video is going. And, head out to Western China and check out what they got going on there if you want to see where we potentially could head with ubiquitous surveillance. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I can't top that, but just a quick reminder that if you are on Twitter, it really pays to follow hashtags of things you're interested in. And as an example of this, Google Calendar went out. I can't remember if it was before last week's episode or after last week's episode, but Google Calendar went out for almost a whole day recently. And luckily, I literally, it still worked on mobile, so I was able to make sure that I could get my appointments. My whole life is planned out in a personal and a work Google Calendar. But I posted a snarky piece of information about it on Twitter. I asked, or I supposed that because Google Calendar was out, it meant any meeting that was on Google Calendar was clearly canceled for the day. So, and I used hashtag Google Calendar, and on an odd click, I clicked on the hashtag and looked at other information about that, and I kept that. And over the last week, following hashtag Google Calendar and also hashtag Google Slides, I learned a bunch of stuff about those two tools, including a bunch of services and tools for Google Slides that I did not know existed before. So as a reminder, if you want to really embrace whether your thing is OneNote or it's Google Classroom or it's Google Slides or it's Microsoft Word or you're still kicking around in Lotus 123, you can find other people that can probably provide to you some information to help you learn that tool better.
Yes, experience the long tail yourself with a quirky and not often trending hashtag, and that is an amazing thing. Jason, inquiring minds want to know the map, which all of our viewers who get to either see the live show or see it later, are constantly looking at. The state of Alaska is covered up, and if the 720p, maybe 1080p version of our video is working, I think I'm seeing coordinates perhaps for a drone-based scavenger hunt. Do you have a good rationale there for the Alaska covering?
I don't. I would say it's because I don't like all day or all night, but it's just that's where the magnet is. In fact, it's actually a little tip I could provide. The way this is hanging up on my wall is I learned this on the internet. Is that so these are big circular magnets that you can buy on Amazon. They're super cheap. But the way I hang up stuff temporarily in both offices in my home is I take masking tape. And I tape this is a big paper clip to the wall, right? and then I take these circle magnets, and then that's how I hang up stuff. So that if I decide I don't want it there anymore, I just take the masking tape off carefully, and then I can move the posters around. So I learned about that a couple of years ago, and in fact, I recently had to move offices, and all the posters that were hanging up were there that way. So all I had to do was just carefully remove my masking tape by slowly rolling it, and then I left no marks on the wall, and I was able to change things up on there. So
there you go.
Another tip from the Tech Savvy Teacher. So,
absolutely. Another reason to always stay to the end of the show, because you never know what life hacks are waiting for you in the EdTech Situation Room conclusion.
So, Wes, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, for a couple days, I'll still be tweeting at W. Fryer, and I might schedule some posts for the next couple weeks. But if those appear, they will be on speedofcreativity.org. And what about you, Dr. Neiffer?
I am on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach, and blog at the NCC Tech Savvy Teacher blog.ncc.org. Hey, stay tuned, because in 1 week's time, we're going to start featuring some E-rate information. And if your district is not taking advantage of E-rate, NCC offers E-rate services, but more importantly, we will be helping educate the public on funding that your school may be missing out on if you don't take advantage of E-rate. This whole thing here, though, is not E-rate. It is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a weekly podcast each Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Central. It's either 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. UTC, time zone, daylight saving, something. You can always see us live. We try to tweet out the link to that at our Twitter account, EdTechSR. Or you can go to our website, edtechsr.com, and there you can find our show notes. You can find a link to every article we talk about on the show, and usually you can find another 20 links that we don't get to in any particular week's episode. You can also download our podcast there, or wherever finer podcasts are aggregated, which includes the Stitcher Radio app, it includes Pocket Cast, it includes the Google Podcast app, although you can't currently ask for us by name on the Google Assistant. Or has that changed, Dr. Farrar?
Mine is working intermittently, and I've continued to receive feedback, direct messages from the Google Nest team, which is the Google Home team, and I think they are addressing it. So give it a shot and let us know if it works for you. But I have been able to have that work a little bit in the last week.
Okay, awesome. And if we don't see you on your Google Home, then we hope to see you on the next episode of the EdTech Situation Room, and we bid you stay safe, stay savvy.